Today's readings are all about forgiveness and reconciliation. So I'd just like you to take a moment or two now just to remember a time when you have been forgiven. And just remember how good that must have felt, how amazing it was. And hopefully what gratitude you felt when you were forgiven, wanting then to share that love and forgiveness with other people and forgive other people. That's what the gospel is all about today, to take on that feeling of forgiveness and pass it on to others in gratitude, to forgive in order to be forgiven. How amazing is it to be forgiven? Just think about how that person in the gospel who was forgiven 10,000 talents must have felt. And it reminds me of a story someone told me. It's a real life story. A few years ago, this man, his son, a teenage boy, was involved in a violent crime against him. This violent crime involved a knife. And he was psychologically scarred, not only physically scarred, but psychologically scarred by this event. And he never really came to terms with it, if you can come to terms with something like that. And very tragically and sadly, he ended up taking his own life a few years later. Very sad circumstances. And then this man and his family, imagine how they must have been feeling. Now, the day of the funeral, this man decided to go out with his other sons to the pub because they've not done that in a long time. And when they got to the pub, guess who was there? Who was another person drinking in that pub? It was none other than the boy, now a man, who had committed that violent crime against his son, leading ultimately to his son's tragic death. Now, it'd be understandable for any of us to react in a very human, emotional, angry, whatever word you want to use, in any way towards that person. And bearing in mind, this particular man is a big, fit man, boxing and everything in his background. He walked up to this young man and he said, "I've just got one thing to say to you. We are a forgiving family and we forgive you." Now imagine how that young man must have felt, or should have felt, that amazing act, that forgiveness that he received. Hopefully it was a burden lifted off his shoulders, and hopefully he went on. I don't know the rest of the story, but I'm hoping he turned his life around and he started to share that forgiveness with others, because in the end, as Jesus tells us, that is the answer to everything. That's the way we're going to heal the world. That man who forgave, his family forgave that young man. He stopped the cycle of violence. It's easier said than done, and this is an extreme example, but we can all be like that man. We're all called to that same forgiveness, because it not only heals the other person, it heals us too. We don't hold on to the pain that is holding us back. We release ourselves from that pain. And we do that by releasing the other person too. Because if there's no forgiveness there, as we know, that cycle of violence, of hatred continues to go around. And that's what the gospel is all about today. Because the man who was forgiven 10,000 talents, 10,000 talents. So the other man that he didn't forgive was 100 denarii. 100 denarii apparently is about 4 months' wages for a normal worker at the time. So that's realistically, you could pay that back, 100 denarii. Apparently 10,000 talents by the same rate of currency would take I think someone said 200,000 years. Maybe that's an over-exaggeration. But if you think about the richest man in the world, I think at the moment is Jeff Bezos. Apparently, it's something like a tenth of his wealth. So you're talking about the billions, you're talking about the top 200 people, top 200 richest people in the world. You can't pay that back. So when he says to the guy, I'll pay you back and just give me some time, that was not realistic at all. And yet he's still forgiven that debt. That is what God is like with us. And so if we've experienced that amazing mercy, the 10,000 talents that we could never pay back, that we would never be able to do anything about ourselves, God forgives us, but only if we turn back to him seeking forgiveness, and only if we then in turn forgive other people, because we don't understand really what forgiveness really is and what reconciliation really is if we don't pass it on and keep sharing it out. That gratitude, forgiving, love, mercy. Keep that cycle, the cycle of love, the cycle of forgiveness. So we pray for that young man. We pray for anyone who can't release themselves from the pain and be able to forgive people. And we pray for those who have been forgiven much, that they can forgive others too.